picture this. Okay. You have spent, let's say the last 3 years studying French.
Oh, wow. 3 years is a lot.
Right. You've used all the apps. You've maintained this ridiculous, like, 700-day streak.
Yep. Doing your daily 5 minutes.
Exactly. You've filled out stack after stack of grammar workbooks. I mean, you know the subjunctive tense. You know the irregular
You
verbs.
just feel incredibly prepared.
You feel like a genius. So you finally take that big trip to Paris. You walk into this tiny, beautiful boulangerie.
Oh, I can picture it.
The smell of the butter and the fresh yeast is just overwhelming, and you step up to the counter, totally ready to flawlessly order a croissant.
You've rehearsed it 100 times in your head.
100 times.
No.
But then the cashier looks at you, smiles, and asks a completely standard, basic question in French. And what happens?
Complete system failure.
Complete and utter flatline. Your brain it freezes, the words evaporate.
Terrifying.
It really is. You end up like pointing at the pastry case, turning bright red, and just grunting out a single broken word before you basically flee the store.
Yeah, we have all been there.
Have you ever experienced a moment like that? Because if you have, you know it is just it's the ultimate betrayal by your own mind.
It really is. I mean, it's a visceral, physical reaction, you know. Your heart rate spikes, your palms literally start sweating.
Your face gets hot.
Exactly. And the cognitive pathways that you spent years building, they just seem to instantly dissolve. We've all been there, whether it's with a new language, or maybe a piano recital, or a high-stakes presentation at work.
Right, where the stakes suddenly feel real.
Yeah. You have all the data meticulously filed away in your brain somewhere, but the retrieval system entirely crashes the moment there is real-world pressure.
Well, that retrieval crash is exactly what we are going to completely dismantle today on this deep dive.
Which I am so excited about.
Me too. We are looking at this incredibly insightful audio guide from a program called Easy English Talk.
Hosted by Jason and Julia.
Right, two really brilliant educators. And they've developed this framework they call the 2-week plan for confident English speaking.
And I think we need to make this clear right away.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even if you, the person listening right now, already speak perfect English, do not tune out.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because what Jason and Julia are actually doing here, it's not just an ESL lesson.
Yeah.
They're deconstructing the mechanics of human learning.
We are looking at the fundamental, cognitive gap between acquiring theoretical knowledge and actually executing practical skills under pressure.
Right. Their framework is ostensibly about language, but the underlying psychology applies to bridging that terrifying canyon between knowing about something and actually doing it.
Yeah, that gap between theory and practice. But I do want to set some expectations right away, though.
Always a good idea.
Because I hear 2-week plan, and my mind immediately goes to those late-night infomercials.
Oh, right. Like get six-pack abs in 10 days by drinking this magical tea.
Exactly. It sounds a bit like clickbait. If we are looking at a 14-day timeline, we have to be realistic about what is actually being promised by this source.
Well, the creators of this curriculum, Jason and Julia, they are very careful to manage those expectations right from the jump.
They aren't promising miracles.
No, not at all. They are not selling a magic trick for overnight fluency. You will not go from struggling with basic vocabulary to, debating philosophy like a native speaker in 14 days.
Right, that's just biologically impossible.
Exactly. The core of their argument is actually about a highly strategic behavioral shift.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What kind of shift?
They are trying to move the learner out of a state of passive reception, where you are just sitting there letting information wash over you, and force you into a state of active creation.
Active creation. Okay, so we are essentially diagnosing why the traditional methods of studying completely fail us out in the real world.
That's exactly it.
So let's look at the baseline problem. In the source material, Jason and Julia call this the trap of the perpetual student.
Ooh, the perpetual student. I love that term.
It's so accurate. They point out this tragic irony where learners are putting in massive amounts of time. We're talking hundreds of hours on grammar rules.
Memorizing endless columns of vocabulary words.
Right, watching YouTube tutorials until our eyes bleed. Yet the moment someone on the street asks for directions, the paralysis sets in.
Total paralysis.
I always assumed this was just, a lack of natural talent, like some people are just language people, but it seems there is a specific mechanism causing this paralysis.
Oh, it has nothing to do with talent. The mechanism is fear. specifically the fear of making errors.
Okay, fear of looking stupid.
Basically, yeah.
Hmm.
And it's compounded by what linguists call the affective filter.
The affective filter, what is that
Okay.
exactly?
So it's a theoretical psychological barrier. It basically prevents learners from acquiring language when they're experiencing negative emotions, things like anxiety, stress, or self-doubt.
So when you were standing in that bakery in Paris,
Your affective filter shoots up like a brick wall. You are so terrified that your pronunciation will be slightly off, or that you'll use the wrong gender for a noun.
like saying le instead of la.
Exactly. And your brain's processing power is entirely consumed by that anxiety rather than actually retrieving the language.
I see the logic there,
Uh-huh.
totally. But it feels like there is a structural flaw in how we are taught to learn in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. The whole school system is kind of built on it.
Right, because we retreat to the grammar books because they offer a safe, controlled environment.
There's no cashier waiting for you to finish your sentence.
Exactly. If I fill out a worksheet in my bedroom, there is a clear right and a clear wrong. I can score 100%. My brain gets a nice little dopamine hit.
You feel incredibly productive.
I feel like a genius. But Jason and Julia point out that this feeling of productivity is actually a massive illusion.
It is an illusion of competence. We treat language as if it were a declarative subject,
Like history or something.
like history or geography, where the goal is simply to memorize facts. If you memorize the capitals of all the countries in the world, you know them. You possess that knowledge.
Right.
But language doesn't work that way. Language is procedural. It is a motor skill. It's much closer to playing the piano or swinging a golf club than it is to memorizing dates.
That lines up perfectly with an analogy Jason uses in the audio. He says that learning a language is like learning to ride a bicycle.
Oh, I loved that part. It's so true.
You cannot get good at riding a bike by sitting on the couch and reading a textbook about the physics of aerodynamics and balance.
You'd just fall over immediately.
Exactly. At some point, you actually have to get on the bike, pedal, and probably scrape your knees.
You have to bleed a little.
Yeah. And I look at how we study, and it's absurd. We treat language like a spectator sport.
That's a great way to put it. A spectator sport.
We just sit on the sidelines reading the rule book, hoping that if we just read it enough times, we will miraculously know how to play the game once we're on the field.
And the bicycle analogy is so apt because riding a bike relies on proprioception.
Proprioception.
Yeah, it's your body's ability to sense its movement, its action, and its location in space. You have to train your nervous system to respond to gravity and momentum in real time.
Right. You can't think about it. You just have to feel it.
Exactly. And language requires a very similar physical and neurological training.
Yeah.
When you are safely hiding behind a vocabulary flashcard on your phone,
Which feels so productive.
it does.
Huh.
But you are only engaging your visual cortex and your short-term memory. You are completely bypassing the motor cortex and the vocal apparatus.
You're studying the aerodynamics but refusing to pedal.
Perfect way to summarize it.
And this brings us to this myth of the perfect moment that Julia talks about in the source.
Oh, the myth of the perfect moment. This is a big one.
We tell ourselves, I'll start speaking once I have memorized just a few more grammar rules, or like once my vocabulary is just a little bit bigger.
Once I finish this textbook,
Right. We are waiting for this magical day when we will finally feel 100% ready to open our mouths and speak without making a single error.
which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of how native speakers actually use their own language.
What do you mean?
Well, if you record a casual conversation between two native speakers, honestly, like the one we're having right now, and you transcribe it, you will find it is riddled with errors.
Oh, for sure.
People stumble over words, they use improper grammar all the time, they start sentences and just abandon them halfway through.
They use filler words, like, exactly what we're doing.
Right. We do it constantly, but it doesn't stop the conversation.
No, we still understand each other perfectly.
Because for native speakers, communication entirely trumps perfection.
Communication over perfection. That's a huge takeaway.
The goal is simply to transfer an idea from my brain into your brain. If I accomplish that, the interaction is a massive success, regardless of whether I use the technically correct prepositions.
So the perpetual student is paralyzed because they have reversed that hierarchy.
Exactly. They believe perfection is the goal, and communication is just a byproduct.
So if you are listening to this deep dive right now, this is the moment for a harsh but really necessary audit of your own habits.
It's time to be honest with yourself.
Think about the skill you are currently trying to acquire. Are you a passive learner? Are you just watching tutorial videos on how to code or how to paint or how to speak Spanish, but you haven't actually written a line of code, picked up a brush, or spoken a single word out loud?
It's so you were trapped in that cycle.
And breaking that cycle requires a radical shift in methodology, which is exactly what this 14-day framework is attempting to do.
It forces the learner to abandon the pursuit of declarative knowledge and start actually building procedural memory.
Okay, so let's dig into the actual structure of this paradigm shift. The claim is that we can break this cycle of perfectionism and passive learning in just 2 weeks.
Which, again, sounds aggressive.
Right. We've already established this won't make you perfectly fluent. So what does progress actually look like at the end of these 14 days? How are Jason and Julia redefining improvement?
They're shifting the metrics of success away from accuracy and moving them toward fluency and confidence.
Okay, so what does that look like on day 14?
Improvement in this model means experiencing just slightly less hesitation before you speak. It means your brain retrieves a specific vocabulary word a fraction of a second faster.
So the translation lag gets shorter.
Yes. It means you can hold a short, basic conversation without the paralyzing anxiety completely spiking.
You are still making mistakes then.
Oh, you'll still make plenty of mistakes.
Yeah.
But the emotional distress associated with those mistakes has significantly decreased.
Okay, that feels much more attainable. But I really want to scrutinize the time commitment they are suggesting here.
The 15 minutes a day.
Yeah. They advocate for just 15 to 30 minutes of focused daily practice, and my immediate instinct is that 15 minutes a day just isn't enough to make a dent.
It feels too easy.
Right, like if I really want to learn something, shouldn't I be locking myself in my room for a grueling 3-hour study session on a Sunday afternoon?
That instinct is incredibly common. But it is entirely wrong when it comes to neuroplasticity.
Really? A 3-hour binge is worse than 15 minutes.
It really is.
Yeah.
We have to look at how human memory actually encodes information. When you attempt a 3-hour binge study session, you rapidly hit a wall of cognitive fatigue.
Your brain just gets tired.
Exactly. Your working memory has a very limited capacity. Once it's full, any new information you try to cram in simply bounces off.
So all that effort in hour 2 and hour 3 is just essentially wasted.
Worse than wasted, honestly.
Yeah.
Because you are likely associating the learning process with exhaustion, boredom, and frustration.
You're training yourself to hate the language.
Precisely. Furthermore, we had to consider the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
Oh, I've heard of this. Remind me how that works.
So if you study for 3 hours on Sunday, and then you do not interact with the language again until the following Sunday, your retention absolutely plummets.
Because there's a huge gap of time.
Right. By the time you sit down for your next session, your brain has discarded the vast majority of what you learned.
Why does it throw it away?
Because it didn't perceive that information as vital to your daily environment. The brain is highly efficient. If you don't use it, the brain assumes you don't need it for survival, so it dumps it to save space.
Wow. So it's the inconsistency that sabotages the effort. It's like you build a beautiful sandcastle on Sunday, the tide washes it away all week long, and the next Sunday you have to start building from scratch.
That is a perfect metaphor. But when you switch to 15 to 30 minutes every single day, you are sending a completely different signal to your brain.
You're telling your neurological pathways, hey, this information is present in our environment every single day.
It is necessary for our survival. Do not delete this.
That makes so much sense.
That daily exposure, even though it's brief, forces the brain to move the language out of short-term storage and begin laying down long-term accessible neural pathways.
And there is a massive psychological advantage to that too, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Trying to convince myself to sit down for a 3-hour marathon study session feels like a huge mountain to climb. I will procrastinate. I will suddenly decide I need to clean my entire kitchen.
You'll find a million excuses.
Absolutely. But convincing myself to just do 15 minutes, I can do 15 minutes while I'm waiting for my laundry to finish or while I'm on the bus.
The psychological friction is so low that you are actually likely to show up and do the work.
And the momentum generated by showing up consistently creates a compounding effect.
We are terribly bad at estimating the power of small, compounding habits.
It's why people struggle with investing for retirement, right?
Exactly. We want the dramatic, instantaneous result. We want the lottery ticket. But real skill acquisition is the product of mundane, daily repetition.
Okay, I am completely sold on the 15 minutes a day. The engine of this plan is consistency over intensity.
100%.
But that brings us to the actual mechanics. What exactly are we doing for those 15 minutes? because if I just stare at a textbook for 15 minutes, that's not going to fix the problem.
Right. The framework divides the 2 weeks into 2 very distinct phases. Week 1 focuses entirely on laying the foundation.
Habit building and input.
Exactly. It's about wiring the brain for sound and beginning the actual physical habit of speaking.
The parameters of this first week are fascinating to me because they strip away a lot of the traditional pressure.
You really do. The focus is strictly on exposure and biomechanics, not on complex grammatical production.
Let's walk through the specific daily tasks they outline. The first one is daily listening. They suggest exposing your ears to the rhythm and the natural flow of the language using podcasts or audiobooks.
Just letting it wash over you.
But I noticed they use the word rhythm in the source material. They aren't telling you to sit there with a dictionary and pause it every 5 seconds to translate every single word you hear.
No, because that would completely defeat the purpose of the exercise. This concept is tied to what linguist Stephen Krashen calls comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input.
Yeah, though in this specific first week task, Jason and Julia are almost entirely focused on phonology.
The sounds.
Right. Every language has its own unique musicality. English, for example, is a stress-timed language.
What does that mean, stress-timed?
It means the time between stressed syllables is roughly equal. So we swallow up all the little unstressed words in between. It gives English a very specific, almost percussive rhythm.
It has a beat to it.
Exactly. Other languages, like Spanish or Japanese, are syllable-timed, meaning each syllable takes up roughly the same amount of time. It sounds much more like a machine gun.
So when I listen to a language, I don't know, it just sounds like a massive unbroken wall of noise. I can't even tell where one word ends and the next one begins.
That unbroken wall of noise is exactly what this daily listening exercise is designed to dismantle.
Really? Just by listening?
Yes. Before you can understand the meaning of the words, your brain first has to learn how to parse the audio stream.
It has to find the gaps.
By listening for 15 minutes a day without the pressure to understand everything, you are training your auditory cortex to recognize the natural boundaries between words.
You start noticing the intonation of a question versus a statement.
Right, and the general cadence of the language.
Yeah.
You're essentially tuning your instrument before you even try to play a song.
That takes a lot of the pressure off. I can just listen to the melody of the language on my commute. But obviously, melody alone doesn't let me order a cup of coffee.
No, it doesn't.
Which is why the next step they introduce is phrase-level learning. This is where they argue that we should learn complete pre-assembled phrases like, I am really busy today, rather than isolated vocabulary words like busy.
This is perhaps one of the most critical cognitive shortcuts in all of language acquisition.
A shortcut? How?
Because the brain does not naturally process language word by word. It processes it in chunks.
Ugh, the chunks. The way I conceptualize this, and let me know if this tracks, is like having a tiny, incredibly overworked United Nations translator living inside your brain.
Huh. I love that image. Let's hear it.
So, if you learn language by memorizing isolated words, like you have a list of nouns, a list of verbs, a list of
The
adjectives.
standard flashcard method.
Right. When you want to speak, you are essentially handing that little UN translator a massive pile of random paperwork.
Figure this out.
Yeah. If I want to say, I am really busy today, my poor translator has to frantically dig through the files to find the pronoun I.
Then calculate the correct present tense conjugation of the irregular verb to be.
Exactly. Then locate the adverb really, find the adjective busy, and finally grab the time marker today.
And then on top of all that, the translator has to check the grammar rulebook to make sure they're assembled in the correct syntax for that specific language.
Right. And while your internal translator is frantically doing all of that complex computational math, what is happening in the real world?
You're standing there staring blankly at the person you're talking to.
Sweating profusely.
Yes, while an incredibly awkward silence stretches on for like 5 or 6 seconds.
It feels like an eternity. And by the time my translator finishes the paperwork and hands me the sentence, the conversation has completely moved on.
That time delay, that lag, is the primary source of anxiety for adult learners.
It's excruciating.
But when you learn in complete phrases, when you memorize, I am really busy today, as a single indivisible unit, you bypass the translator entirely.
You just grab the whole folder.
Exactly. You're no longer doing grammatical computation. You have a pre-assembled chunk of language that you can simply retrieve from memory and deploy instantly.
It's the difference between buying a pile of random car parts, like a steering wheel, some bolts, a spark plug, and expecting to drive to the grocery store.
versus just buying the pre-assembled engine.
You just turn the key and it works.
And furthermore, learning in phrases provides context, which is how human memory actually functions.
Context is king.
The brain is highly associative. An isolated word floating in a vacuum is very hard to remember. It has nothing to stick to.
Right.
But a word embedded in a phrase has neighbors, it has a location, it has a practical use. This drastically reduces the cognitive load required to speak.
So we have the rhythm from the daily listening, and we have the pre-assembled chunks from the phrase learning.
Right.
The third element Jason and Julia emphasize in week 1 is solo speaking. They explicitly tell the listener to speak out loud every single day, even when they are completely alone in an empty room.
Just narrate your life.
Yeah. Say, I am opening the door. I am making coffee. Now, I always thought talking to yourself in a foreign language was just a psychological trick to build confidence because no one is there to judge you.
Well, the psychological safety of an empty room is certainly a benefit, but the primary function of this exercise is entirely physical.
Physical.
It goes back to the bicycle analogy we discussed earlier. Speaking is a complex biomechanical act.
It uses muscles.
Yes. Your jaw, your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords. They have spent decades forming the very specific, habitual shapes required for your native language.
My mouth basically has muscle memory for English.
Exactly. And when you attempt to speak a new language, you are asking those same muscles to perform unfamiliar acrobatics.
Shapes they've never made before.
Right. Certain sounds in Arabic or Mandarin or French simply do not exist in English.
Huh.
If you have only ever read those languages in a book, your muscles have absolutely no idea how to physically produce them.
So solo speaking is literally physical therapy for your mouth.
It is. You are training the motor cortex and the vocal apparatus to form new shapes.
You have to build the physical stamina. I remember when I tried to speak French for like 10 minutes straight on a trip once, my face literally started to hurt because I was using muscles around my jaw that I normally never use.
It's a real workout.
Yeah.
And doing it alone in a room lets you stumble through that physical awkwardness without the social pressure of another human being watching you struggle.
It separates the physical difficulty of pronunciation from the social anxiety of communication. You only have to deal with one hurdle at a time.
Which is brilliant scaffolding for a learner.
Which sets us up for the final and I think most intense technique of week 1, shadowing.
Shadowing. This is where the magic happens.
In the source, they describe shadowing as listening to a native speaker and immediately repeating what they say almost at the exact same time. You mimic their pronunciation, their speed, and their intonation perfectly.
Shadowing is a tremendously powerful neurological tool because it forces an activation of the phonological loop.
What's the phonological loop?
It's a component of your working memory that's responsible for processing spoken language. But more importantly, shadowing forces you to bypass the analytical, translating part of your brain.
See, I struggle to understand how that works in practice. If I am repeating something a split second after I hear it, I don't even have time to process what the words mean. I feel like a parrot just making noises. How is that actually helping me learn?
The fact that you don't have time to process the meaning is exactly the point.
Wait, really?
Yes. When we learn a language as adults, our analytical brain is way too dominant. We want to stop, dissect every single sentence, analyze the grammar, figure out the root of the verb, and translate it back to our native tongue.
Yeah, you want to solve it like a puzzle.
And this analytical dominance is exactly what makes adult learners speak slowly and haltingly. When you shadow, you are moving at the native speaker's speed. You are physically forced to override that analytical brain.
Because there's simply no time.
Right. You don't have time to analyze, you can only mimic.
It's like singing along to a fast rap song on the radio. I might not know what half the lyrics actually mean, and I definitely couldn't write them down from memory, but I can hit the rhythm and the timing perfectly because I'm just writing the wave of the audio.
That is a perfect parallel. You are internalizing the physical sensation of native level speed and intonation. You're firing mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
Yeah, observing an action and immediately replicating it. Over time, that physical familiarity begins to map onto your cognitive understanding. Your mouth gets used to moving at that native speed, so when you actually do know the words later, you don't have that halting, robotic, translate as I go delivery.
Okay, so that is week 1, 15 minutes a day. We are listening to the rhythm to parse the noise. We are memorizing pre-assembled phrases to bypass the little UN translator. We are doing vocal physical therapy by talking to ourselves, and we are shadowing to override the analytical brain.
They have a very robust foundation.
If you actually commit to that, by day 7, you have laid a massive foundation. Your brain and your mouth are primed, which means we are ready for the transition.
We move from input and mechanics to output and courage.
Output and courage. Week 2 is the activation phase.
This is where it gets real.
This is where we take the training wheels off.
Yeah.
The safety of the empty room starts to fade, and we transition from acquiring the language to actively producing it. And again, there are specific shifts in behavior for this second week outlined by Jason and Julia.
What's the first one?
The first is what they call thinking in English, or whatever your target language is. They want you to narrate your daily activities inside your mind in the new language without using your native language at all.
This represents a profound cognitive leap. We have to examine the architecture of how a beginner usually forms a sentence.
Walk me through it.
It is almost always a 3-step process.
Right.
Step 1. You generate the concept or the thought in your native language. Step 2. You consciously translate that native thought into the target language, vocabulary, and grammar. Step 3. You articulate it out loud.
That middle step, the conscious translation phase, that's the bottleneck.
It is. It's the translation lag.
It feels like having a dial-up internet connection in your brain while the person you are talking to has fiber optic. You just can't keep up.
And that translation lag is incredibly resource intensive. It drains your cognitive battery so rapidly.
So how does thinking in the language fix that?
By forcing yourself to generate the internal monologue directly in the target language. Thinking, I'm opening the fridge, directly in English or Spanish, without passing through your native language first.
You are attempting to sever the reliance on the middleman.
Exactly. You are trying to wire the concept of a refrigerator directly to the new vocabulary word, rather than routing it through the English word refrigerator first.
I imagine this is exhausting at first. My brain is going to desperately want to revert to the easy native pathway.
Oh, it will resist aggressively, yes. But even attempting it for a few minutes a day starts to build those direct semantic links.
Now we arrive at a task in week 2 that I find universally horrifying.
Let me guess. The voice recording.
Yes. The second element of week 2 is recording your own voice. The framework says you need to speak for 1 to 2 minutes on a specific topic, record it on your phone, and then listen back to it to track your progress and spot your errors.
It's powerful stuff.
I have to push back here, though. Listening to my own recorded voice is a deeply cringy, uncomfortable experience, even in my native language. Why on earth do we need to subject ourselves to this psychological torture in a language we are already insecure about?
The discomfort you're feeling is real. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon called voice confrontation.
Voice confrontation. Okay, what causes it?
Well, when you speak, you hear your own voice primarily through bone conduction.
Bone conduction, like vibrations in my head.
Exactly. The vibrations traveling through your skull actually make your voice sound deeper and richer to you.
Okay, that makes sense.
But when you hear a recording, you hear it through air conduction, exactly as the rest of the world hears it. It sounds thinner, higher pitched, and completely unfamiliar.
Right, it feels like an imposter is speaking.
Your brain rejects it because it doesn't match your internal self-perception.
But beyond just getting over the cringe, what is the actual pedagogical value of recording it? Why can't I just listen to myself while I'm speaking live in the room?
Because you do not have the cognitive bandwidth to do both simultaneously.
Oh, really?
Yes. When you are speaking a foreign language, especially as a beginner, 100% of your working memory and processing power is dedicated to simply generating the words, remembering the grammar, and physically controlling your mouth muscles.
You're just trying to survive the sentence.
You have absolutely zero bandwidth left over to objectively monitor how you sound. You are flying blind.
So if I make a massive pronunciation error, my brain doesn't even register it because it's too busy just trying to retrieve the next verb.
Exactly. But by recording yourself, you completely separate the act of producing the language from the act of evaluating it.
Ah, I see.
When you play the recording back, the pressure of production is gone. Your cognitive bandwidth is completely freed up. Now, you can become your own objective observer.
You can actually listen.
You can listen and say, wow, I paused for a really long time before that verb. Or my intonation goes up at the end of every sentence like I'm asking a question when I shouldn't be.
It removes the panic from the analysis. And I suppose there's a massive motivational benefit here as well.
Oh, huge.
If I record myself on day 8 and then again on day 14, I have objective, undeniable physical proof that I am getting better. When you are in the middle of the struggle, it feels like you are making zero progress. The recording proves that you are.
And tangible evidence of progress is one of the most powerful motivators in any learning endeavor. The cringe of hearing your own voice is a very small price to pay for that level of objective feedback.
The next step in week 2 moves us beyond just isolated sentences. The framework introduces storytelling.
Storytelling. This is a big step up.
They advise describing a past memorable experience or outlining your detailed plans for the future. We are moving from basic stuff like I am holding a cup to actually stringing thoughts together into a narrative.
This is where we practice the stamina of communication. Human beings do not communicate in isolated staccato sentences.
Right. We don't talk like robots.
We are narrative creatures. We share stories, we explain sequences of events, we express cause and effect. Storytelling forces the learner to grapple with the connective tissue of the language.
The connective tissue, you mean the syntax.
Exactly. It's figuring out how to use transitional words like however, suddenly, after that, because. It's entirely different from just reciting a grocery list.
And it requires a manipulation of time, too. To tell a story, you must seamlessly move between the past tense to describe what happened, the present tense to describe how you feel about it now, and the future tense to explain what you will do next.
Which is cognitively demanding.
It really is. It mimics the cognitive demands of a genuine, sustained conversation, building the mental endurance required to actually hold the floor.
Which brings us to the final boss battle of the 2-week plan.
The real-life application. Jason and Julia state very clearly that all the solo speaking and recording in the world is totally useless if you don't eventually use the language with another human being.
You can't stay in the lab forever.
You have to send voice messages, join a language community online, or find a language exchange partner.
Because a language in a vacuum isn't a language, it's just a code. Language is fundamentally a social tool designed for human connection.
Right.
The problem with all the previous exercises, the shadowing, the recording, the talking to yourself in a room, is that they're perfectly predictable. You control the entire environment.
But the real world is total chaos.
Utter chaos.
Yeah.
When you interact with a real human being, they will use vocabulary you haven't studied, they will speak way faster than you are comfortable with, they will use slang, and they will react unpredictably to what you say.
They might interrupt you or change the subject.
True fluency is not forged in the safety of your bedroom. It is forged in the messy, unpredictable, improvisational back and forth of genuine human connection.
You have to step into the arena.
Yeah.
So that is the complete 14-day architecture. Week 1, priming the brain and the mouth with input and mechanics. Week 2, activating the language through internal monologue, objective feedback, narrative stamina, and real-world chaos.
It is a brilliant, highly practical system.
It really is. But I know myself, and I know human nature. We start things with massive enthusiasm on day 1, and then we completely derail. Jason and Julia address this directly in the source material.
Yes, they do.
They map out the specific saboteurs, the traps that will destroy this 2-week plan if you aren't careful.
And it is vital to anticipate these failure points because they are incredibly common. The enthusiasm on day 1 is actually dangerous if it isn't channeled correctly.
Why dangerous?
Because it leads to the first and most prevalent saboteur they identify: cognitive overload, trying to learn far too much, far too quickly.
This is that binge studying mentality creeping back in, isn't it?
Exactly.
The audio mentions learners trying to memorize hundreds of words a day or burying themselves under massive lists of complex grammar rules. It feels productive at the time, but it's actually destructive.
It is the confusion of effort with effectiveness. If I spend 3 hours staring at a list of 200 vocabulary words, I will feel exhausted, and I will mistake that exhaustion for learning.
But cognitive load theory dictates something else, right?
Yes, the working memory can only handle a small amount of novel information at any given time. If you flood the system with 200 new words, the brain simply triages the information and discards almost all of it to protect itself from overload.
So you wake up the next day, you realize you've forgotten 90% of what you studied, and the frustration is just crushing.
You feel like a failure.
When in reality, your brain was just doing exactly what it evolved to do.
Precisely. The strategy must be depth over breadth. It is infinitely more valuable to perfectly master 5 highly useful phrases to the point where you can retrieve them instantly without the translation lag than to have a blurry, unusable, inaccessible memory of 200 random words.
Depth over breadth. I love that. The second trap they highlight is ignoring the speaking practice entirely.
We've hammered this point, but it bears repeating.
It is so easy to fall back into passive learning. Reading a book feels safe. Watching a video feels productive. Opening your mouth feels dangerous. If you yield to that fear, the 14-day plan collapses.
You have to speak. There is no workaround.
The third saboteur is skipping practice days, which they explicitly call out as the absolute killer of progress.
Because consistency is the absolute bedrock of neuroplasticity in this context. We discussed the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve earlier.
The sandcastle on the tide.
Right. When you learn something new, the neurological connection is incredibly fragile. It begins to decay almost immediately. If you practice on Monday, skip Tuesday and Wednesday, and try again on Thursday, that fragile connection has already dissolved.
You are essentially starting over from zero every time you sit down.
You never build momentum. But when you touch the language every single day, even for just 15 minutes, you interrupt that decay process.
You reinforce the pathway.
You force the brain to strengthen the myelin sheath around those specific neural pathways, making the signals travel faster and more efficiently.
That is why the 15-minute threshold is so brilliant. It removes the excuse of time. You might be too busy for an hour-long lesson, but no one on earth is too busy to listen to a 15-minute podcast while they wash the dishes.
You cannot claim you don't have 15 minutes. You just can't.
The fourth trap they mention is deeply psychological, the comparison game. Julia mentions this specifically in the audio, comparing yourself to fluent speakers instead of comparing yourself to who you were yesterday.
That is a deadly trap.
If I am on day 3 of this plan, and I start comparing my halting, awkward sentences to a native speaker's effortless fluency on YouTube, my motivation is going to instantly evaporate.
Because the comparison game is deeply toxic. It relies on a false equivalency. You are comparing your day 3 to someone else's year 30.
It's not a fair fight.
It goes back to the core theme we discussed at the very beginning, redefining the purpose of the language. When you compare yourself to a fluent speaker, you are judging yourself against a standard of absolute perfection. But perfection is not the goal. Connection is the goal.
Which brings us to what I consider the absolute crown jewel of this entire framework. It is a concept that completely flipped my understanding of learning on its head.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Jason says in the source, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, that confidence does not come before action. Confidence comes from action.
Let's really sit with that, because our natural instincts are completely backward on this.
We all operate under the assumption that confidence is a prerequisite. Once I feel confident, then I will speak.
Once I feel ready, then I will apply for the job.
Exactly. We believe that if we just study enough, if we just prepare enough, we will one day wake up infused with this magical sense of unshakable confidence, and the fear will just be gone.
That is the myth of readiness, and it is the single greatest paralyzer of human potential.
The myth of readiness.
The neurological and psychological reality is that the fear never leaves until you act. Action is the prerequisite for confidence, not the other way around.
So how does that actually work in practice? If I'm terrified to speak, how does speaking make me confident?
It is about gathering empirical evidence to rewrite your brain's threat assessment.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you are standing in that bakery in Paris, your brain perceives speaking French as a massive existential threat. It triggers the fight or flight response.
It thinks a tiger is about to eat me.
Exactly. But you act courageously by choosing to speak anyway, despite the fear, despite the imperfection. You open your mouth, you stutter, you use the wrong verb tense, you butcher the pronunciation.
And what happens?
You survive. The cashier doesn't mock you, the police don't arrest you, the building doesn't burn down. In fact, the cashier hands you the croissant you asked for. You successfully communicated.
So my brain realizes I'm not going to die.
Yes. Your brain registers that survival. It logs the empirical evidence. We engaged in the terrifying behavior and we did not die. In fact, we succeeded.
Wow.
That logged evidence is what generates confidence. The next time you go into a bakery, the threat assessment is slightly lower.
You realize the stakes are actually incredibly low. You survive the cringe and the survival builds the armor.
But if you never take the action, you never gather the evidence, your brain never updates its threat assessment, and the confidence never arrives, you stay stuck in the workbook forever.
Confidence is a trailing indicator. It follows the messy, imperfect action. It does not precede it.
That's beautifully said.
That is just profound to me. It completely reframes the anxiety. The anxiety isn't a sign that you shouldn't act, it's the exact doorway you have to walk through to actually build the confidence.
It's the only way through.
Okay, let's synthesize everything we've unearthed today from Jason and Julia's framework on easy English talk. If you want to bridge the gap between knowing about a language and actually speaking it, or truly acquiring any intimidating new skill, you must abandon the safety of passive observation.
You have to get out of the stands and step onto the field.
You must prioritize consistency over intensity, embracing the mundane power of a 15-minute daily habit. You must bypass the cognitive bottleneck of translation by learning in chunks and forcing your internal monologue into the new language.
You must train the biomechanics of your body through solo speaking and shadowing.
And you must willingly subject yourself to the objective feedback of your own recorded voice. Most importantly, you must abandon the pursuit of perfection and embrace the chaos of genuine communication.
You have to give yourself permission to make messy, glorious mistakes. Because without the mistakes, there is no action. And without the action, there is no confidence.
So, to you, the listener, here is the direct challenge from this deep dive. Look at the 2-week framework we just deconstructed. I want you to start week 1 today.
Not next Monday.
Not when you've bought a new set of highlighters, not when you finally feel ready. The myth of readiness is dead. Start today, find a piece of audio in the language you want to learn, listen for 15 minutes, and repeat a single phrase out loud. Force your mouth to make the shape. That is it. That is day 1.
And as we close this deep dive, I want you to take this concept of the myth of readiness and apply it beyond language learning. Think about your life right now.
Yeah, look at the bigger picture.
We have established that true confidence is generated entirely by taking messy action, by stepping into the arena while you are still afraid and imperfect. In what other area of your life are you currently sitting on the sidelines, endlessly studying the grammar of a situation, waiting for a perfect moment of confidence that will never arrive, when what you really need to do is just open your mouth, embrace the imperfection, and start participating?